Danmachi. What is Danmachi? Well, if you ask some people, it is a fan service slog light novel that has no redeeming qualities. Putting aside this true fact that it is nothing but Astrea is Brestia, I'd like to talk about the depth to this story. By that I mean, I'd like to talk about Danmachi's gacha game, specifically the Astrea Record event, the 3rd anniversary of the game, which I believe is the best piece of the Danmachi content in existence right now. Now, I don't believe that this is going to stay that way, mainly because I think this Freya arc is currently rounding up to be the best piece of content in the series, but we'll see whether Amori drops the ball on that one. But until then, I'm going to say Astrea Record is the best. Now, I'm now going to have to justify this statement, but I'd like to first say that I don't think the other pieces of content in the show are that bad. I think it's just like a 9.5 versus a 9, you know? They're pretty close, but I think this one just about edges over. Like the Xenos arc, the dungeon arc that takes place after the Xenos arc, and the Hour of Orion movie are all really good pieces of content, but I think I prefer Astrea Record just for the sheer amount of character and the story that it has. Now, not a lot of people in the community have probably played the event because it is locked behind a gacha game. However, there are YouTube videos that have the entire event just played out in front of you. Now, it does take a while to get through because each event is like 4 hours long, but I think it's well worth it, especially seeing if you're just reading it and you're not listening to the devices or get a synopsis of it. You don't really get the character of the characters, or you really get to appreciate the story as much as someone who's read and listened to the event. Now, this is specifically because the story puts focus on two of my favorite characters in the series, Ryu and Ottar. These characters, well, are now beginning to get focus. Ryu has just had her big arc in the light novel, which in some people's minds probably made her the favorite character in the series, and Ottar has yet to really got any focus in the main series, but I do believe Ottar is probably the most important character going forward in Belle's development. Now, that's going to need an entirely separate video to talk about, but right now I just want you to remember that going forward. So, going into this, know that I have bias towards these two characters, but I think everyone has a bias towards their favorite characters, so I'm just gonna move forward, and that's just something you can say, yes, this man is biased, so obviously he loves this event. But I do think there's a lot of good to take from this event. Specifically, it is going to be the depth it gives to Ryu, especially if you've read this event and then read what happens to her in the light novels. It gives so much more context, and you actually care about these Astrea familia, other than being like, damn, these random characters we just met died. So, on that grounds alone, I think it is worth a read just to give even more depth to Ryu's suffering, because as you know, being Ryu is suffering. The story of Astrea Record is broken down into 3 separate parts: the rise of evil, lost justice, and ultimate clash. The rise of evil is obviously the beginning of the story. It focuses on the Astrea familia and the impact they have in Orario. Orario, at this point, is a much different city than the one we see in the main novel. It has much more crime and violence going on a daily basis. The defeat of the Zeus and Hera familias that happened 15 years before the main story have caused Orario to really lose all faith in their familias. This requires familias actively suppressing crime and stopping evil familias on a near daily basis. This setting really allows us to get a look at the darkness of the series, one that is primarily explored in the Sword of Toria novels, is on full display here. We see Ryu at this point is much more naive than she is in her current iteration, as she is yet to go through all the trauma that she is destined to go through. This is best seen in her friend Ori, who, spoiler alert, dies in the first part. So this is just the beginning of her trauma, as it causes Ryu to become completely disillusioned with justice. The bombings that take place are all suicide bombings, with Ori in particular being killed by a child bomber. Now, that's pretty dark, and I don't think it will get adapted into an anime very well, but yeah. That event in particular shows how deeply, not traumatized, obsessed the evil familiars are with their gods, being willing to sacrifice even their own children in order to see their will done. At the same time, the Ophreda and Loki familiars come into contact with Zord and Althea, former members of the Zeus and Hera familia respectively. At this time, Ottar, who is still the strongest in the city, is easily defeated by Zord, which the entire city sees and causes the entire city to lose their confidence in defeating evil, as their strongest guy was literally just wiped out. The god Erebus, who alongside Zord and Althea wish to destroy Astraea, announces their plan to the entire city. This is done in the backdrop of numerous gods being sent back to heaven, so clearly the event opens with a strong beginning, setting up the conflict of both Ryu and Ottar. The second part of the anniversary, Lost Justice, tells the story of Ryu's trauma after the events of the first part. Ryu and Ottar both get very different focus in this part. It is primarily focused on Ryu. As such, we'll cover Ottar's story in this part first. Ottar, after being defeated by Zord, rampages through Astraea, defeating any member of evils he comes across. This is eventually stopped by his familia, specifically Alan, as they have come to kill him so that he does not get himself killed while fighting. This is so at least they can gain experience from his death, rather than him dying for nothing. As such, they begin to battle for several hours, which at the end of the day eventually results in Ottar defeating his familia. After this, Ottar's status reaches its maximum, and he also regains the will to fight Zord, as he no longer fears Zord and as such can fight at his full potential. Ryu, on the other hand, is traumatized by the events of the first part, specifically Ori's death. She asks her familiar captain Elise and her familiar deity Astraea, the goddess of justice, what justice is. However, neither one can give a satisfactory answer for Ryu. As such, she runs away from her familia for the majority of this part. During this time, she meets Erebus. Erebus taunts Ryu, hoping to see her finally completely break. As such, he has members of evils attack Astrea and the homies familia. They are vastly outnumbered, and Astrea and the homies familia are quickly driven to the point of death. At this point, Erebus offers Ryu a deal. If she allows Astrea and the homies familia to die, then he will spare Astraea. Upon hearing this, Ryu is strongly tempted to simply agree with Erebus's offer so that she may save Astraea. However, after seeing Astrea, despite being on the verge of death, certain that Ryu and Astrea familia will save her and Astraea, Ryu rushes to Astrea's side, protecting her. Astrea is saved by a thief that already saved only a few days prior. Ryu, seeing this, finally understands what her justice is. In her mind, justice is a chain that connects everyone, and that as long as one continues to pass that justice on to others, justice will always find a way to come around. No matter how long it takes, it will always succeed. After this, Ryu is joined by the rest of her familia, who drive evils off. In order to uphold their oath to their goddess, they spread their wings of justice, vowing to drive evils from the city forever. The second part of the anniversary ends with the entirety of Orario's adventurers united under the same wings of justice, finally putting aside their differences to fight as one group to defeat evil and save Orario. Ultimate Clash is the finale of the anniversary. It tells the story of Orario's adventures triumph over the forces of evil. The story can be broken down into two main battles: Astrea Familia and Loki Familia versus Althea and Daphne, and Ottar versus Zod. The first of these battles is Ottar versus Zod, but they both take place simultaneously. Ottar battles Zod in front of the Tower of Babel at the center of Orario. The adventurers of the city build a barrier around them so that only those two may fight. Despite the battle raging in Orario, the entirety of its outcome is going to be decided in the center by just two people. Zod, who as a former member of the Zeus Familia, is far stronger than Ottar, and at the beginning of their battle, despite Ottar being stronger and more resolved to win, is still capable of defeating Ottar, knocking him to the ground several times. Despite this, Ottar, when all hope was lost in Orario, continues to get up. The clash caused by their blades reverberates around the city, giving adventurers the strength and will to continue to battle despite the impossible odds, knowing that as long as that battle takes place, there is still a chance for them to win. During this battle, monsters from all gates of the city break through and start heading for the center. This causes all the old adventurers to leave their younger allies and rush to the center, being slaughtered en masse just so that Ottar has a little bit more time to defeat Zod. This leads to all the old guard being wiped from the city. However, at the center of the city, this is exactly what Ottar needs to defeat Zod. Ottar's battle with Zod is a constant struggle, both mentally and physically. Ottar, despite wanting to be stronger than Zod, still has to respect him. Despite being the Khan's strongest adventurer, he recognizes the gap between him and the older generation that Zeus and Hera familiars are from. Zod also respects Ottar for his tenacity. However, the goal of Althea and Zod, at least on the surface, is to destroy the city so that true heroes like the Argonaut may be born again. Ottar rejects this, as he understands Zod's true intentions after battling him. He realizes that Zod and Althea are sacrificing themselves so that Orario may become stronger. This causes Ottar to fight harder than ever, for the first time fighting for someone who isn't Freya, but for all of Orario. Ottar, despite not desiring the title, resolves himself to become the hero of Orario and defeat Zod. With renewed vigor, Ottar manages to slowly overcome Zod, eventually defeating him in a massive clash that shakes all of Orario. This results in him reaching level 7 and the adventurers winning the battle outside of the dungeon. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the Astrea Familia and members of the Loki Familia battle Althea and the calamity summoned by the deaths of many gods, Daphne. The Astrea Familia members battle Althea, while the Loki Familia members battle Daphne. The Astrea Familia struggles in their battle against Althea, However, Eyes, upon seeing the dragon, begins to use her Avenger skill, causing the black wind to cover the battlefield, dealing significant damage to the monster at the risk of her own life. Although initially overwhelmed by Althea, the Astrea Familia eventually push her to the point of her sickness beginning to affect her. At this point, Althea uses all the magic she possesses. However, at the decisive moment, it is countered by the use of the Aegis shield. Ryu and Elise are then able to land a critical attack on Althea, severely injuring her. At this point, Althea congratulates the Astrea Familia. However, she then warns them that justice is a frail and vulnerable thing. This is a lesson that clearly Ryu did not take to heart, as can be seen later in the series. However, after Althea dies, the Astrea Familia level up and then, with their newfound strength, manage to defeat Daphne with the help of the Loki Familia. At this point, the day is saved and all returns to the status quo before the main story. A little disappointing, but what can you do? It is a prequel story. The villains also have an extra story to expand on their motivation behind their actions. This extra story provides some of the biggest reveals of the anniversary. Specifically, that Althea is the aunt of the series protagonist Bel Crownell, and that his parents were members of the Hera and Zeus Familia. Although, considering Zeus is Bel's grandfather, this was kinda obvious, but it's nice to get the confirmation. The former Zeus and Hera Familia members sought to test the Aurario adventurers after the fall of their familias. If Aurario failed to stop them, in their minds they were doomed to fail all along. So, choosing to sacrifice their own legacies, they decided to test Aurario so that it may be a stronger and safer place, so that Bel would not have to risk his own life fighting. Obviously, this isn't exactly how it played out, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and Bel is probably going to save the Danmachi world, so that is a W for them, I guess. So I was going to cover all the characters in this section, but seeing the video is so long, I'll just cover the main two here. Ryu and Ottar are going to be these two characters, but we'll focus on Ryu first. Ryu's character is a lot younger and more naive than her current self. She goes through the first part of her trauma in this story, and as any fan knows, it's all downhill from here. The story does, however, provide some path to her salvation though. After all, in this story, Ryu defines her justice as something that comes around and goes around, and although it takes a while and she loses sight of it, her efforts to help those around her eventually reward her in the form of Bel, Althea's nephew. A young, naive boy unwilling to abandon his sense of justice even for monsters. Although, needless to say, this event will probably be covered in the 4th season of the anime, so I don't want to spoil what happens here. However, this also provides some context to the loss of Ryu's familia, which is an event that is very important to the character, but didn't have much focus in the light novel. Ottar hasn't received much focus in the main story. He has received some in Sword of Toria and the Familia Chronicle Freya, but even then, it's not that much. Despite this, Ottar is one of the characters with the most potential in the story. This story serves as the first real look at how Ottar views himself and those around him. He clearly has an inferiority complex when it comes to his strength, and even after this event and into the main story, he is still cursing his own weakness. The story also displays that Ottar is capable of putting aside his devotion to Freya when the situation calls for it. This might play into the main story when it comes to how the current Freya arc ends. Only time will tell if Ottar can live up to his potential as a character, but I am hopeful that Amori will handle him well and deliver us all this and more in the main story. So, in conclusion, the weakest part of the story is really the ending, but you couldn't exactly do anything to the characters unless you kill the Astrea Familia at the end, because this is a prequel. It doesn't take place in current time or in a non-canon world, I suppose. Although I am quite happy with this, as I like how the story turned out overall, as it was more of a character study than anything else. This was primarily focused on Ryu, with some Ottar mixed in. It also provides some background to the worlds of Danmachi, which is always good, and in specific the Astrea Familia. Ottar getting his character explored here is very good, however it might mean that it never gets explored in the light novel, which would be a real shame, but I don't know what you can do about it if Omori feels he's retreading old ground. Overall, I would highly recommend this story to anyone trying to get into the Danmachi or simply exploring the series after finishing the anime. Although, for new fans, not a lot of concepts to Annie are explained, but if you just watch the first season of the anime, I think you can really get into this without too much effort. And for any fans that have already read it, they probably recognize the Danmachi greatness that is present in the story. So, with all that being said, I'm probably just going to end this off with the Astrea Familia's speech on justice that happens in part 2 of the story. So, with that being said, I'll see you guys later.
使命を果たせ、天秤を正せ、いつか星となるその日まで。秩序の砦、清廉の王冠、覇者の灯火、友を守り、希望をつなげ、願いを託せ、正義を巡る。たとえ闇が空を塞ごうとも忘れるな。光は常にそこにあることを。女神の名のもとに天空をかけるがごとく、この大地に星の足跡を綴る。正義の剣と翼に誓って、正義の剣と翼に誓って。
Hey people, post-editing Bionic here. So, the Familia Chronicle of Freya is being adapted in Danmachi right now, and they just announced a new Ottar unit, so even if you don't want to play the game, download it and summon my boy. That is all.